I've been working as an internet technician for about 5 years now, and let me tell you, you meet all kinds of people in this job. Some are nice, some are grumpy, and some, well, let me tell you about this one day that I'll never forget. It was during the peak of summer last year. I'd just finished a pretty straightforward installation at a house in the suburbs when I got called to an apartment building downtown for a router issue. Now, anyone who's worked downtown knows that parking is an absolute nightmare, especially during business hours. I've been doing this job long enough to know the drill. Usually, when I'm headed to apartment buildings, I try to do a quick equipment drop off first. It saves time, and most residents are pretty understanding about it. So, when I pulled up to this fancy apartment complex in my company van and saw the residents' only parking spots right in front, I figured I'd do my usual routine. Quick stop, unload the equipment, then find proper parking. I had barely put the van in park when I heard someone screeching from above. I looked up to see a woman leaning over her balcony, red-faced. She was yelling, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. When I tried to explain that I just needed to quickly unload my equipment, she cut me off, pointing out aggressively that the spots were for residents only. I attempted to reason with her, explaining that I only needed 5 minutes, but she wouldn't hear it. She shouted that she didn't care if it was 5 minutes or 5 seconds. I needed to move my van immediately or she'd call the police. I tried one last time to explain that I was there to fix someone's internet, but she just got more aggressive, asking if she had stuttered and threatening again to get her phone. At this point, I had two choices. I could either stand my ground and risk having to deal with unnecessary drama, or I could just find another spot. I chose the latter. It wasn't worth the hassle, so I drove around for about 15 minutes before finding a spot about 4 blocks away. I gathered my basic tools, locked up the van, and made the long walk back to the building. When I got to the apartment number I was supposed to service, I knocked on the door, and wouldn't you know it, the same woman who had just finished screaming at me opened the door. Her eyes went wide, and her mouth dropped open slightly, but I decided to play it completely straight. I introduced myself as being from the internet service provider, asking about the router issues she'd reported. She just stood there for a moment, opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water, before quietly inviting me in. I walked in and started setting up my diagnostic equipment. The whole time she was hovering nearby, clearly uncomfortable. I could tell she was hoping I wouldn't bring up what had just happened outside. After running some initial tests, I turned to her with my most professional smile and explained that I needed some equipment from my van, warning her that it might take a while since I had to park so far away. She quickly offered that I could park in the residence spot right outside, saying it would be fine. I politely declined, stating that those spots were for residents only and I wouldn't want to risk getting in trouble. She insisted again, emphasizing that, as a resident, she was giving me permission. I maintained my position, telling her I appreciated the offer but wouldn't want anyone calling the police on me. The way her face flushed when I said that, it took everything in me not to smile. I left and took my sweet time walking to and from the van. When I got back, I worked for a bit, then announced I needed something else from the van. Again, she tried to convince me to park closer, but I politely refused, stating I was almost done anyway and just needed to make one more trip to get my network tester. What should have been a 45-minute job ended up taking almost 3 hours. Every time I needed something from the van, I made the long walk, taking my time enjoying the beautiful summer day. She didn't say a word about the parking situation again, just stood there getting more and more frustrated as the minutes ticked by. When I finally finished, I handed her the service completion form to sign. I cheerfully told her everything was working perfectly now, apologizing that it took so long and commenting that if only there had been parking closer by. I wished her a wonderful day as I left. The look on her face as I walked out, somewhere between embarrassment and anger, was better than any tip I could have received. I, 21 male, have always had issues with my older brother, 22 male. Growing up just a year apart should have made us close, but instead, he made my life miserable. He beat me up regularly, take my things without asking, and our parents always seemed to take his side. It got so bad that I moved out as soon as I turned 18. Luckily, my uncle, who was a police officer at the time, took me in. He even helped me out by giving me his old decommissioned police Crown Victoria. That car became my pride and joy, and for some reason, this really got under my brother's skin. He went through 3 junker cars in the time I kept my Crown Vic running perfectly. After he crashed his 3rd car, he came asking to borrow mine. He tried to guilt-trip me by saying he needed it for work and had the nerve to call me entitled. I refused, telling him to take the bus since I knew how badly he drove. He didn't like that answer and went crying to our parents. They called me immediately, with my mom insisting I should let him borrow the car because he supposedly needed it more than me. I stood my ground and told her I needed it for work too and wasn't going to risk my only transportation. A few days later, I finished my shift and found my car missing from the parking lot. I called my brother, but he didn't answer. When I called my parents, they tried covering for him. I demanded to know if they knew where my car was and if he'd taken it. They claimed they didn't know anything about it. When I threatened to call the police, my mom quickly changed her tune and admitted he'd borrowed it because he really needed it. He showed up 20 minutes later with my car, smugly showing me a set of Universal Crown Vic keys he'd bought online. I was furious and warned him that if he ever stole my car again, I'd have him arrested. He just shrugged it off and had the audacity to ask for a ride home. I told him he could walk since he'd made me wait in the freezing cold. My uncle even installed a tracking device in the car just in case. But during our family Christmas party, while the roads were covered in ice, I looked out the window and my car was gone again. I checked the tracker app and called him immediately. When I asked where my car was, he told me to screw off and said he was just picking up a friend and would be back soon. I asked if he'd been drinking, but he just hung up on me. 20 minutes later, he called back panicking. He'd driven my car into a ditch. When we got there, the police were already on scene. My parents tried to cover for him again, with my mom claiming that I had been driving and they were just there to help. I immediately spoke up and told the truth about him stealing my car. Turns out his license was suspended from his last accident, and he'd been drinking. They arrested him right there while my mom cried and begged. The officer warned my parents they could be arrested too for lying to police. My uncle had arranged with his old police buddies to scare my brother straight. They roughed him up a bit in jail, talking about prison life until he literally wet himself. They never filed a DUI charge, just a suspended license fine. My brother finally learned his lesson, paid to fix my car, and gave me back those universal keys he'd bought. My parents still pretend like none of this ever happened, but at least my brother never touched my car again, though I'm still planning to get the locks changed just in case. My family moved to this neighborhood years ago to escape the hustle of city life. We've always been the type to keep to ourselves, which worked perfectly since our neighborhood was split between social butterflies and private folks like us. We'd exchange occasional hellos with neighbors throughout the year, and that was enough for everyone, until Karen next door suddenly snapped. Karen had been our neighbor since before we moved in, and everything was peaceful until one night when my brother's friends accidentally parked a bit too close to her mailbox. We think that's what triggered her transformation from a normal neighbor into, well, Karen. From that day forward, she became a constant source of headaches. Her favorite hobby? Calling the police on us for blocking her mailbox. On Sundays of all days. The cars weren't even close to her mailbox, and seriously, who gets mail on Sundays? Every time the police showed up, they'd tell her to stop wasting their time and handle things like a normal neighbor. They even warned her that they'd start ticketing her for false calls. So what did she do? She started parking her freeloading son's car in that spot just to spite us. One summer day, my brother, my best friend, and I were playing catch with a baseball in front of our houses. We were being careful to stay away from the houses and Karen's car. My friend threw the ball a bit short, and it rolled toward Karen's car, gently tapping her back driver's side tire. Nothing dramatic, just a light tap on the rubber. To be safe, we decided to take our game to the park. When we returned an hour later, Karen was standing in front of her house, looking around like she was searching for something. She spotted us and immediately started screaming that we were in big trouble. When my brother asked what she meant, she got even more agitated, insisting that we knew exactly what we'd done. I played dumb and asked what she was talking about, which only made her more frustrated. She accused us of damaging her car with our baseball, claiming she had video evidence. When I mentioned the ball that had merely rolled into her tire, she vehemently denied that was what she meant. She then led us to her car and pointed at a dent on the passenger side, completely opposite from where the ball had tapped her tire. I told her we hadn't caused that damage. She insisted she had video proof and threatened to show it to the police. When I asked to see this supposed video, she refused, claiming we would delete it from her phone. My brother sent our friend inside to get our mom, while Karen kept gloating about how we'd have to pay a huge fine. Mom came charging out like a tornado and demanded to know what Karen wanted now. Karen repeated her accusation about having video evidence of us damaging her car and demanded payment. After we explained everything, my mom even offered to watch the video with her hands behind her back while Karen held the phone. But Karen refused, instead demanding immediate payment and threatening to call the police. That's when my mom started laughing. Not a happy laugh, but the kind that makes everyone uncomfortable. Then she unleashed on Karen, calling her out for not having any video and trying to blackmail us. Karen took offense at being called a witch and started criticizing my mom's parenting, calling us delinquents. My mom fired back by comparing us kids, pointing out how my older brother was joining the military and I was a straight A student headed for a scholarship. Then she dropped the bomb about Karen's son being jobless, freeloading, and abusing his wife. Karen was visibly shocked that anyone knew about her son's behavior, and my mom made it clear that the whole neighborhood was aware of the situation. When my mom threatened to file a harassment claim, Karen tried to call her bluff. My mom doubled down on her threat, and Karen ran back into her house. True to her word, my mom called the police and we all gave our statements. We could hear Karen screaming at the officer when they went to her house demanding to see the video. After a minute of her yelling, the officer simply wrote her a ticket. A week later, we found out the police had started an investigation into her son's domestic violence situation based on what my mom had revealed. Karen and her son both moved out within a month, and the neighborhood has been peaceful ever since. My partner and I were living our quiet life in Massachusetts when everything went sideways after my father-in-law passed away 6 months ago. We weren't close to him, but he was a decent man who lived alone in his house in Inverness, Florida. The real drama started when my brother-in-law suddenly packed up his entire family and moved across the country into our father-in-law's house. We didn't even know about this until weeks after the fact. One random Tuesday morning, my partner got a call from the brother-in-law. He demanded that my partner sign some papers for our father's estate, saying he'd email them over right away. When my partner asked what papers he was talking about, mentioning we hadn't heard anything about the estate, the brother-in-law brushed it off and said it was just a quit-claim deed that needed to be signed that day. My partner, confused, asked for clarification about the deed. The brother-in-law impatiently explained it was for our father's house, adding that he was already living there and we just needed to sign. When my partner tried to understand what was going on and asked what our father had left behind, the brother-in-law pulled rank, reminding us he was the brother-in-law and we should just do what he said. The call ended with my brother-in-law hanging up. My partner and I were completely confused. We hadn't received any information about the will, the estate, or anything else. Just this demanding call about signing away rights to a house we didn't even know was part of the inheritance. A few days later, another call came. The brother-in-law angrily demanded to know why we hadn't signed the deed yet, reminding us he'd sent it 3 days ago. My partner explained that we needed to understand what was happening with the estate first. The brother-in-law accused my partner of being difficult, once again pulling the brother-in-law card and insisting we just sign. My partner explained that's not how things worked and we needed to see the will and understand what Dad left behind. The brother-in-law's response was a thinly veiled threat, telling us we'd regret this. The calls kept coming, getting more aggressive each time. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, we received a letter from a lawyer with a cashier's check for $2,887. Just like that, we were supposed to accept this amount and sign away our rights without knowing anything about the estate's total value or what was in the will. My partner tried reasoning with his brother again. He brought up the check we'd received, but insisted we needed to see the will and estate documents first. The brother-in-law dismissively told us that was our share and we could take it or leave it. When my partner asked how he'd calculated this amount and inquired about the house and other assets, the brother-in-law became defensive, saying he didn't have to explain anything to us and threatening to make things difficult if we didn't sign the papers. My partner pointed out that he was already making things difficult by not being transparent. That's when the brother-in-law lost his patience, dropping his act of being nice and giving us an ultimatum to sign the papers by Friday or else. At this point, we'd had enough. We contacted a probate lawyer in Florida who told us what we suspected. This whole situation wasn't normal. Apparently, as beneficiaries, we had the right to see all estate documents, including the will, inventory, and accounting. Our lawyer sent a formal request for documentation, and suddenly the brother-in-law wasn't so confident anymore. He demanded that our lawyer back off, but my partner insisted on our rights as beneficiaries. The brother-in-law tried to claim we were just wasting money on lawyers, when my partner suggested he could just show us the estate documents instead. The brother-in-law threatened to take us to court. What the brother-in-law didn't expect was that we actually did take it to court. Our lawyer filed a petition for a full accounting of the estate and requested the court to supervise the administration. When the judge ordered him to produce all documents, things got interesting real quick. It turns out the house was worth over $400,000, and there were investment accounts worth another $200,000. Our actual share should have been closer to $300,000, not the measly $2,887 he tried to push on us. The judge wasn't too happy about how the brother-in-law had moved into the house without any proper accounting or agreement from other beneficiaries. The brother-in-law had to move out of the house within 30 days. The property had to be sold at market value, and a new independent administrator was appointed to handle the estate. He blamed us for ruining everything, but my partner pointed out that he did this to himself by trying to cheat us. The brother-in-law tried to claim he was doing us a favor by offering anything at all, but my partner just told him we'd see him in court for the final distribution. In the end, we received our fair share of the inheritance, and the brother-in-law was removed from his position for breaching his fiduciary duty. He had to pay back the rent for the time he lived in the house too. The last we heard, he was desperately looking for a new place to live, complaining to anyone who would listen about how we destroyed his life by not accepting his $2,887 check and keeping quiet about the rest of the estate.